Hi, pre-algebra friends. These are the notes for day 2 of 3.4 instruction, and we're going to focus on writing linear equations in slope-intercept form today, given a specific piece of information. So this is a really, really important section. So please pay attention because it's got a lot of information, and you're going to want to go back and reference all of this when you're doing your practice later on this evening. Okay, so let's start with just what is slope-intercept form. And of course, as we've been talking about for probably months now, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So our goal today is to write every equation in slope-intercept form. So in order to do that, we have to be able to find two important pieces of information, m and b. So as you should remember from previous lessons, m is the slope, and b is the y-intercept. Okay, please remember also in a real life situation, the slope is often referred to as the constant rate of change. Or you can just say rate of change. And the y-intercept is often referred to as the initial value. So remember, as we've been talking about these vocabulary words, those are just a couple of the synonyms, and it's just important to remember all of that vocabulary so when the question asks it in a different way, you understand what they're looking for. So we're going to start off pretty simple here. In this first section, it just says write the equation of a line when you are given the slope and the y-intercept. So in this first set of problems, I can see that they're telling me the slope is -2, and I know the slope is m. The y-intercept is 5. I know that that's b. So when I plug that into my slope-intercept form, my equation is y equals -2x plus 5. Okay, so the slope goes here. The y-intercept goes here. Same thing with number 2. Whoops, for this one, sorry about that. I meant to use my highlighter. The slope is 3/4. The y-intercept is -3. So the equation of this line is y equals 3/4 x minus 3. Notice I'm not using an addition sign in this equation, so I don't write plus -3, just show that subtraction there. Okay, so how do we find the equation of a line when given a graph? So there are a couple things I want you to think about here. The first important piece of information, or first thing I want you to think of is, remember, what would slope dude say? Like, how do these graphs look? Is the line increasing from left to right with a positive slope or decreasing with a negative slope? So you can see that in question number 3, the line rises from left to right. So this line has a positive slope. To find our slope when we're given a graph, remember m is equal to the rise over the run. So I'm going to start by drawing my slope triangle. And just remember, you can use any 2 points on the line to find the slope. So for number 3, my rise is 1, 2, 3, 4 units, and my run is 1, 2, 3. So that means the slope of this line is 4/3. Remember, the y-intercept of the equation is where that point crosses the y-axis. I'm just going to pick a different color here. So that's this point right here. More importantly, I want you to pay attention to the ordered pair. So remember, the y-intercept is always going to be the point at which x is 0. And that's going to come up later again in this lesson, so please try to remember that. So our y-intercept for this particular line is -5. So when I plug those two things in, y equals 4/3 x minus 5. We're going to do the same thing for number 4. So first of all, I would think about what would slope dude say. Looks like this line is falling from left to right, so it has a negative slope. I'm going to draw in my slope triangle. The reason it has a negative slope is because the line or the run goes down. So instead of going up, I'm going down 2 and over 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure you count your units carefully. So my slope is -2/4. I do want to simplify that, so I rewrite that as -1/2. Remember, slope is a fraction, so you always write it in simplest form. Just remember, anytime you need to pause this video, if I'm going too fast, just pause so you can catch up with me. All right, y-intercept of this line is right up here at 0, 1. So the y-intercept is 1, making the equation of this line y equals negative 1/2 x plus 1. All right, so I think we've covered slope given a graph, so I'm going to skip number 5 and 6 for now because we've got a lot to talk about today. So let's go on to this next section, and this is where we're going to talk about tables. How do we write the equation of a line given a table of values? So we've talked about this before as well. To find the slope, it's not rise over run, it's change in y over change in x. So here, excuse me, I'm just going to look for my change in x, which is 1. My change in y, it looks like I'm increasing by 2 every time. So my slope is 2 over 1, or you can just write that as 2. Okay, notice for right now, we're just finding the slope, not writing the equation of the line yet. Okay, I do want to show you these next two examples. Here I can see that my x is increasing by 1. And I can see that my y is going down this time, so it's decreasing by 0.5. I know I usually tell you guys not to write the slope using a decimal, but this time I'm just going to leave it because there are decimals in the table, so I think it's okay to give our slope that way. So it's just negative 5/10. Okay, as x is increasing, y is decreasing, so that has a negative slope. Now, I really want you to pay attention to this next one because this is an interesting table. So notice on the left-hand side, x increases by 3. Hold on, let me check my math there. From negative 5 to positive 2, yes, that's 3. And then it increases by 2. And then increases by 3 and increases by 2 again. So you might be thinking, hey, wait a second. Does this one represent a linear function? Is that a constant rate of change? Well, we have to check it. So we're going to check the change in y as well. So from negative 16 to negative 7, you add 9. And then negative 7 to negative 1, you add 6. Then add 9. Then add 6 again. So as you can see, we have got some different values here. So we want to compare those ratios. So between the first 2 points, the change in y over the change in x is 9 over 3. And between the second 2 sets of points, the change in y is 6 and the change in x is 2. Well, when you simplify both of those, notice they both simplify to the number 3. Therefore, it proves that those ratios are equivalent and the slope of the line can just be written as 3. All right, moving on to something new. Okay, so we just practiced finding the slope. This section is how do we find the y-intercept given a table. So you might have remembered me saying this earlier in the lesson, or we talked about this last week. The y-intercept is when x is equal to 0. So a lot of times you can see it right in the table. So you can see right here in every single table, when x is 0, I just pick up that y value. So in the first one, the y-intercept is 1. In table 2, it's 3. And in the last one, it's negative 1. Now, that seems really easy, I'm sure, but unfortunately, it's not always so easy. So let's look at this next example. So this section says, what do I do if 0 is not in the table? And this is probably the most challenging thing we're going to do, so please pay close attention in this section. So when your y-intercept cannot be found in the table, the first thing we're going to do is still find the slope. So I'm going to start by doing change in x, change in y, looks like is plus 4. Just make sure that pattern is consistent all the way down your table. So it looks like my slope is 4 over 1, or you can just write that as 4. Okay, so once you identify the slope, I want to take the slope and 1 point from the table. I've chosen the first one because it's got the smallest numbers, but you can use any one of those 5 points. So I now know slope is 4, and then I'm going to use the point 111 as my x, y values, and I'm going to plug those in to my equation, and I'm going to find b. So when the slope is 4 and x is 1 and y is 11, it looks like this. So you plug 4 in place of m, 1 in place of x, and then 11 in place of y. And then you just use your equations work to solve for b. So I'm going to start by multiplying 4 by 1, which is just 4. And then using an inverse operation, since I'm adding 4, I would subtract 4 from both sides. And so I can now see that 7 is the value of b. And then using those two values, I can now write the equation of my line. So y equals 4x plus 7. Okay? You might have also noticed that in the table, if you can see the pattern in x and the pattern in y, that sometimes it's really easy to work backwards to find the value at which x is 0. So here, if I'm adding 1 to get to 0, I would subtract 1. And then that means I would also use the opposite operation here. So to work backwards, if I'm adding 4, I would subtract 4, and 11 minus 4 is 7. Okay, so there's that ordered pair also proving that the y-intercept is 7. Okay, again, if your y-intercept is visible in the table, like we see in this next example, you don't have to do all that work. So it just makes it a little bit simpler. So we're going to start by finding the slope first. We're going to back up to there. Again, our change in x is 1. This time, our change in y, it looks like is increasing by 2. So that means my slope is 2 over 1, or 2. And in my table, I can easily see that my y-intercept is -4. When x is 0, y is -4. So again, all I do then is plug those two things in to write the equation of my line. So y equals 2x minus 4. All right, we're getting there, friends. We got a couple more things to do. So the next thing we're going to do is review how to graph lines in slope-intercept form. So again, this is our y equals mx plus b. Okay, so this is a great review. We did this earlier, but so hopefully it'll come back to you a little bit. So here, if y equals 2x plus 1, I start by identifying the slope, which is 2, and the y-intercept, which is 1. And my next step, remember, I'm always going to start by plot the y-intercept first, which is the beginning of my line. Okay, so my y-intercept is 1. I plot a point at 1 to count a slope of 2. Remember, 2 is like 2 over 1, so I go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, and I plot a couple more points. I'm going to grab my shape tool, that arrow with, the line with an arrow at both ends. Whoops, that wasn't super great. So let's try that one more time. I'm going to pop that in there. Okay. And then we're going to do one more of those. So let's look at this next one. I'm going to skip the graph on the right, and we're going to go underneath. So 4y minus 8 equals 2x. I like this one because it reviews what we talked about last week. Is this a linear function, and how do I know? So remember, the way that we know is if you can write it in the form of y equals mx plus b. So I want to isolate y in that equation. So I'm going to start by finding the term that contains y. Using an inverse operation, I'm going to add 8 to both sides. Bring my 4y down, and then over here 2x plus 8. Remember, I cannot combine these two terms because they are not like terms, so you cannot add the 8 and the 2. My final step is to divide both sides by 4. So notice all of the terms on the right, both of those terms divide by 4. So this 4 cancels. There's my y by itself. 2/4 is a fraction that does not divide evenly, so I just simplify that to 1/2. And then 8 divided by 4 divides nicely to 2. So now I can easily see that my slope is 1/2. My y-intercept is 2. So I'm going to begin my line at +2. To count a slope of 1/2, it's up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. And then go ahead and connect that with your shape tool to make your line. All right, I'm going to show you one more quick thing. By the way, this section down here is the homework for this section. But I am going to do one problem with you that was not covered in the review above, and that's problem number 8. So we're going to look at that one together. So this one is finding the slope from 2 points. So this is, again, not something that we haven't done before, but I just wanted to remind you that you do your slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if this is my x value and y value in the first point, this is my x value and y value of the second point. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Notice I'm not using the subtraction sign as in place of the negative. Keep both of those signs, but I do want to clean up my signs, so I do my stay, change, change. Okay, use your calculator if you need to help you with that math. -20 plus 8 is -12. -12 plus 3 is -9. And then I'm going to clean up my signs one more time, and negative over negative is a positive. Both of these numbers are divisible by 3, so I'm going to simplify that fraction. My slope is 4/3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So my slope in simplest form is 4/3. All right, gang, so you need to complete the problems, again, from 1 to 22. We did the evens today, and we're going to do the odds tomorrow, but make sure you do all of these for practice, and I'll be sending out a review in preparation for the quiz.